let go of my marriage. I let go of everything. I literally made a decision that I had to.
For 2 decades, Erika was living this lavish lifestyle off the backs of these victims.
Can you set the record straight for us? Did Erika know anything? Everybody wants to know.
I think she does.
Let's go. Thank you, Tom.
You don't have the compassion because you don't want the compassion to seem like you're guilty. I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty.
Welcome back to Celebrity News Addict, and Happy New Year to my CNA family. As it's my first video of 2026, I just want to thank you all for the overwhelming support last year. It's honestly so heartwarming and amazing to watch our community grow, and I can't wait for everything I've got planned for this year and all the new tea to spill. For today's video, we're diving into the messy legal meltdown surrounding Erika Jayne, a story that now involves millions of dollars, multiple lawsuits, a looming jury trial, a controversial divorce, and serious allegations of behind-the-scenes manipulation. Since filing for divorce in 2020, Erika's life has unraveled on every front. She's now hurtling towards a $25 million bankruptcy trial in February over alleged fraudulent transfers, fighting 2 separate lawsuits brought by designers Christopher Psaila and Marco Morante, which together could expose her to another $18 million in damages, all while being accused of conspiring to file a strategic divorce, allegedly designed to shield herself from financial and criminal liability in Tom's crumbling empire. So today, we'll be getting into it all. How it started, how it spiraled, and where Erika stands right now. Plus, we're talking Erika's struggles divorcing Tom while he's under conservatorship, and everything we know so far about her new relationship with John McPhee. From crumbling legal empires and alleged embezzlement, to secret settlements, disputed millions, and a jury trial just weeks away, this isn't just another reality TV divorce story. It's a legal nightmare playing out in real time. So, let's get straight into it. As always, there's so much to cover here, so we're going to work in a timeline. To understand why Erika is in court today, we have to first rewind all the way back to when she met Tom, before jumping into her divorce filing in 2020, which opened the floodgates to a financial, legal, and criminal investigation against Tom and multiple lawsuits against Erika in a mess that is far from pretty and is still unraveling, with her trial scheduled for just a couple of weeks' time. So, Erika and Tom first met back in the late 1990s when Erika was 27 and working as a cocktail waitress at the LA restaurant Chasen's, where Tom, then around 60, was a regular. At the time, Tom was a high-flying attorney. He started his law firm Girardi in LA in 1965, focusing on personal injury cases, and quickly made a name for himself, especially in medical malpractice. By 1970, Tom had secured a malpractice verdict of $1.4 million, reportedly the largest of its kind in California at that time. Over the years, Tom also became known for toxic tort cases, which are lawsuits involving hazardous exposure to chemicals and pollutants. Over the next 5 decades, he took on major corporations and won over 130 verdicts and settlements of $1 million or more, including a $333 million settlement against PG&E back in 1993. One attorney even told LA Magazine that insurance companies would settle with him on reputation alone. So by the time Erika met Tom, he already had serious status and serious money. According to an interview with People in 2018, Erika said that when she met Tom, quote, "Marriage was the furthest thing from my mind. But the relationship moved fast. Erika moved in within months, he proposed 6 months later, and they married in January 2000 at the LA Country Club." This was Erika's second marriage and Tom's third. And despite Tom's previous bad divorces, they didn't sign a prenup. Erika told People magazine, quote, "Everyone thought I was marrying him to have a baby and lock down the money, as ugly as that sounds. But," she claimed, It really was two people coming together who really enjoyed each other's company. And by the time Erika joined Real Housewives of Beverly Hills in 2015, Erika was dripping in designer, they lived on a massive Pasadena estate, and she even had her own chapel built in their 10,277 square foot, 2-acre property. Fast forward a few years and Erika was still publicly describing the marriage as solid. In 2017, she told Bravo's Daily Dish that what made it work was, quote, "You have to be friends. You have to have a common ground." Adding, "You know Tom is very supportive of me and I'm very supportive of him, and I think that's what makes it work." However, all wasn't sunshine and rainbows behind the scenes. In the rare glimpses we did get to see of Tom, the dynamic between him and Erika wasn't always warm.
Have great looks.
Great intellect.
Excuse me, Erika. This is me talking, not you.
Tom is always the boss. As a matter of fact, in my cell phone, it comes up the boss. The boss is calling. He finally called me. I said, "Where have you been?" So I was just assuming he was with some other woman.
And then came the moment that changed everything. As after rumours of cheating and mistreatment, Erika filed for divorce from Tom on November 3rd, 2020, after 21 years of marriage. In her statement at the time of the filing, Erika said, quote, "After much consideration, I've decided to end my marriage to Tom Girardi. This is not a step taken lightly or easily. I have great love and respect for Tom and for our years and the lives we built together." Adding, quote, "It is my absolute wish to proceed through this process with respect and with the privacy that both Tom and I deserve. I request others give us that privacy as well." In the filing, Erika listed irreconcilable differences as the reason for the split. She also requested spousal support and asked to terminate the court's ability to award support to Tom. She also asked that Tom pay her attorney's fees. Then, 1 month later, Tom filed his response where he asked to terminate the court's ability to award Erika spousal support and requested that she pay the attorney's fees and costs. Looking back, that divorce filing becomes the starting point for almost everything that happens next, because within weeks, lawsuits start landing. And those lawsuits don't just accuse Tom, they start pulling Erika in too. So, on December 2nd, 2020, just weeks after Erika's initial divorce filing, a complaint was filed in Illinois federal court by Edelson PC on behalf of families connected to the Lion Air Flight 610 crash, accusing Tom and Erika of embezzling settlement funds intended for victims' families. The lawsuit claimed at least $2 million was misappropriated after Tom settled the case against Boeing in 2019. The complaint said, quote, "Tom has resorted to embezzling the proceeds of settlements that should have been directed to his clients, including, as the basis for this complaint, the widows and orphans who lost loved ones in the tragic crash of Lion Air Flight 610, in order to continue funding his and Erika's lavish Beverly Hills lifestyles." Tom's law firm, Girardi Keese, was also named in the suit, which claimed that both Tom and the firm were, quote, "on the verge of financial collapse and locked in a downward spiral of mounting debts and dwindling funds." It also referred to Erika and Tom's divorce as simply a sham to protect their money from those looking to collect debts. Then the dominoes started falling, fast. In March 2021, in the midst of his divorce and embezzlement lawsuit, Tom was diagnosed with dementia and late-onset Alzheimer's after undergoing medical assessment, and his younger brother Robert was granted conservatorship. More fuel was added to the fire in June 2021 when the ABC documentary, The Housewife and the Hustler, aired and highlighted multiple accusations that Tom misappropriated client money. As well as the Boeing Lion Air lawsuit from 2019, Tom had also been sued by Joe Ruigomez after being caught in a gas pipe explosion back in 2010, which left him critically injured. Joe hired Tom to represent him in a case against PG&E. Tom settled the multi-million-dollar lawsuit for the family and suggested they place the funds in one of his investments and dispense the money monthly. 4 years later, Joe claims that the payments had, quote, disappeared completely, and the family sued Tom for the rest of the money, which led to a shocking confession in September 2020, where, when deposed by Joe's attorney, Tom admitted he was broke, saying, quote, "At one point, I had about 80 million or 50 million in cash. That's all gone. I also had a stock portfolio of about 50 million, and that's all gone." More allegations followed, including a hormone therapy settlement case where clients accused Tom and his firm of misappropriating $10 million of their settlement funds. Tom later borrowed $17 million from 2 different lenders before settling with these victims. As complaints like these flooded in, Tom was officially disbarred in the California federal court in August 2021. Meanwhile, Girardi case collapsed. In December 2020, the firm faced involuntary bankruptcy petitions from their creditors, and by January 2021, the firm was defunct. Then, in March 2022, reports stated that the firm owed creditors over $500 million across 522 claims that had been filed against them. Then, in November 2022, the State Bar of California revealed that Tom had been investigated for more than 200 disciplinary matters over 40 years. In an open letter, the agency wrote, quote, "Girardi caused irreparable harm to hundreds of his clients, and the State Bar could have done more to protect the public." At this time, an LA Times investigation also showed that Tom had close relationships with several bar officials and often provided them and their families with expensive meals, private jet rides, free legal works, and jobs at his firm to protect himself from the fallout of his misconduct. Then, in February 2023, Tom was indicted on fraud charges tied to the Boeing crash victims. He was charged with 8 counts of wire fraud and 4 counts of criminal contempt of court, while 2 former employees from his firm were also both charged with 12 criminal counts. The 3 attorneys were accused of stealing more than $3 million in settlement funds meant for victims' families and using it for, quote, "improper purposes," including paying the firm's payroll and operating expenses and funding settlements to other Girardi case clients. A couple of months later, in June 2023, a neuropsychologist found Tom competent to stand trial despite his Alzheimer's. Fast forward to August 2024, and Tom was found guilty and convicted of 4 counts of wire fraud following a 13-day trial in LA. The court determined that he embezzled more than $15 million from his clients. In a statement released by the Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada said, quote, "Tom Girardi built celebrity status and lured in victims by falsely portraying himself as a champion of justice. In reality, he was a Robin Hood in reverse, stealing from the needy to support a lavish Hollywood lifestyle. Today's verdict shows that the game is up. We can all now see this defendant for what he was, and the victims he callously portrayed." Then, on June 3rd, 2025, Tom Girardi was sentenced to 7 years and 3 months in prison and ordered to pay over $2.3 million in restitution to victims, alongside a $35,000 fine. Just hours before his sentencing, Tom's legal team had tried to convince the judge to allow him to serve his sentence in a mental care facility, rather than a prison. However, after questioning the severity of Tom's dementia, the judge concluded that prison was a fair and safe punishment. So that's Tom's downfall, and it's massive. But now we get to the question that's been the cause of even more controversy. What did Erika know, and how was she involved? So, things started heating up for Erika in early 2021, when she was named in multiple lawsuits tied to Tom. She was listed as a co-debtor on personal payments to Amex and the Bel Air Country Club, and she was mentioned in connection with clients who hadn't received settlement funds from Girardi Keese. Then, in The Housewife and the Hustler, which aired on June 14th, 2021, the documentary featured court papers that stated that Tom had transferred $20 million in loans from Girardi Keese to Erika's company, EJ Global. Then, something else happened that triggered even more suspicion surrounding Erika. Her own lawyers started backing away. On June 15th, 2021, Erika was dropped by the firm Dinsmore & Scholl, who were representing her in Tom's bankruptcy matter. Peter Mastran, a partner in the firm, said, quote, "There has been a fundamental and material breakdown in the relationship between the firm and Miss Girardi. In my good faith and judgment, the attorney-client relationship has been irreparably damaged, and it is no longer possible to carry on with the necessary degree of trust and confidence which is foundational to that relationship." Then, on July 14th, 2021, reports revealed that the trustee in Tom's bankruptcy case, Alyssa D. Miller, filed a lawsuit against Erika, demanding the return of $25 million that she received fraudulently from Tom. The suit named Erika, EJ Global, and Pretty Mess Inc., alleging that during the trustee's investigation, she learned Erika received roughly $25 million in receivables and benefits, including jewelry and luxury items, tied to Tom's attempts to hide money from his creditors. According to the suit, the $25 million included over $14 million in Amex charges made by Erika on a Girardi Keys card, and over $11 million in vendor payments made for Erika's benefit. The lawsuit argues that these payments funded Erika's entertainment career and alleged that Erika and Tom conspired to conceal transfers and keep assets away from creditors. It also described EJ Global as a shell entity allegedly created to funnel money from the firm. The suit also referenced a 2012 settlement assignment, where Erika received payments of $242,648 between 2012 and 2021, and was set to receive another $78,000 between 2022 to 2025. The trustee demanded that Erika return not only the $25 million, but also the jewelry and all other luxury items in her possession that were transferred to her by Tom. Around the same time, creditors in Tom's bankruptcy case filed motions accusing Erika of refusing to turn over financial documents to the bankruptcy trustee after it had been found that Tom had fraudulently attempted to hide his assets. As part of this motion, Erika's accountant was requested to turn over bank statements, receipts, and communications between her accountant and divorce attorney, as well as records for EJ Global. The documents said, quote, Erika has refused to provide access to her management company, her CPA, which also houses her management company, any books and records of EJ Global, or any of her affiliated companies. It continued, quote, as each day goes by, Erika has been publicly dissipating community assets by selling her clothes on public websites, flaunting large jewels on social media and on television, and has done nothing to assist in returning structured firm payments being made to her instead of the firm by the California Lottery. Adding, quote, moreover, the trustee has received zero cooperation from Erika, which is consistent with someone hiding assets. The creditors expressed concern that Erika would spend the funds that Tom's firm had sent to her so that they couldn't claim it, concluding that it was necessary to, quote, trace her money and investigate the receipt of funds, her purchases, including the bling and the glam. And then we hit the pop culture lightning rod, EarringGate. In 2007, Tom gifted Erika a pair of diamond earrings valued at $750,000, which would later become a public symbol of her complicity in Tom's criminal activity. Following the media explosion around the earrings, on January 6, 2022, Erika's attorney, Evan Borges, said she would agree not to sell the earrings and would place them in escrow pending the trustee's investigation. He insisted Erika was innocent and had no knowledge of wrongdoing, stating, quote, the trustee has no claim based on Erika innocently receiving a gift of earrings 15 years ago from her now estranged and then extraordinarily wealthy husband. But despite this defense, in February 2022, a federal judge ordered Erika to hand over the earrings, now worth $1.4 million, and the proceeds were used to repay victims. So, EarringGate was settled, but the bigger war remained. The trustee's attempt to claw back the full $25 million from Tom, his firm, and Erika. And this is the trial she's heading into in just a few weeks' time. So far, Erika's main defense in this case has essentially been that the fraudulent payments from Tom were to Erika's business, EJ Global, and so are not her personal liability to repay. Erika has also consistently denied knowing the money was improper. In her defense documents, Erika's lawyers also argue that prosecutors in Tom's criminal case didn't allege Erika did anything wrong at the time. However, on May 14, 2025, attorney Ronald Richards claimed that Erika could still be personally liable for the payments made to EJ Global from Girardi Keys under alter ego theories. This is because Erika is the only employee or representative of EJ Global. According to Richards' post, quote, the CA Franchise Tax Board already found this business to be a sham and only for tax deductions. And if this is the case, then Erika, as the alter ego for her company, could be personally liable. Clearly, Erika's defense arguments weren't enough to convince a judge that she was innocent or oblivious to Tom's actions, as on July 20th, 2025, it was revealed that Erika would be headed for a jury trial on February 17th, 2026, with pre-trial set for January 28th. Ever since this date was set, Erika has been frantically struggling to settle the lawsuit before it reaches trial. On September 22nd, 2025, a full day of mediation was held to try to reach a settlement. However, no conclusion was reached, and further settlement talks were scheduled for October 7th. When this date rolled around, again no settlement was made. According to a post on X by attorney Ronald Richards on October 9th, quote, "Settlement negotiations are still ongoing. Erika can either roll the dice and risk insolvency or work out a principled settlement. The defense of Girardi kept the books and she didn't know about the ledger or that the account was named to her LLC, so she gets a pass is a losing one. She received $25 million for nothing. Funds received like this gets clawed back in a bankruptcy case. Her state of mind is irrelevant." Then, on December 24th, Richards posted to Instagram, stating, quote, "Settlement talks have broken down completely between Erika and the trustee. Pre-trial hearing is less than 30 days away, with a 2/10/26 trial date now a real thing. Erika has little options, panic setting in. But with the stress of this looming over her, she's not just dealing with one lawsuit, because now it's time to get into the two separate lawsuits against Erika worth another $18 million brought by two Hollywood designers who claim that Erika and Tom attempted to scheme the business Marco Marco out of $787,000 by accusing the designers of making unauthorized charges to Erika's American Express card. Let's get into it. This all started in November 2016, when, according to the allegations, Tom asked rhobh, a Secret Service connection, to launch an investigation into designer brand Marco Marco over allegedly fraudulent Amex charges on Erika's card. In exchange, Tom reportedly agreed to represent rhobh and his wife in a Volkswagen case. Allegedly, the day after Tom settled the case for rhobh and Michelle, Erika met with the agent, where he equipped her with a wire to go and meet with Christopher Psaila, the owner of Marco Marco, to discuss $800,000 worth of fraudulent charges she claims he made to her Amex. On that recording, Christopher allegedly admitted to overcharging Erika around $100,000, initially blaming his bookkeeper and claiming that he and his partner, Marco Morante, would, quote, "take full liability and responsibility." After his initial confession, Erika accused him of making over $800,000 in false charges. Christopher immediately denied this, saying he didn't know how that would even be possible. The following month, in January 2017, Marco Marco was raided. Christopher was later indicted on 9 counts, including identity theft and wire fraud, and Erika received a refund onto her Amex of $787,000. But Christopher later claimed the charges were legitimate and that Tom's connections influenced the case. To make his defense against the 9 counts brought against him, Christopher hired criminal defense attorney and ex-federal prosecutor Stanley Greenberg, who raised questions about the nature of the case, stating, quote, "The Secret Service just seemed to have a very intimate role in this whole thing, and it included getting money for Tom Girardi and not bothering to question one of the main witnesses. Everything just reeks of the fact that they were doing some kind of favor." According to reports from the time, after looking through evidence provided by Christopher, which proved the legitimacy of 100 disputed charges, Greenberg, quote, "realized that there wasn't a discrepancy at all and wasn't going to let Christopher plead guilty. So he subpoenaed Erika and Tom to stand as witnesses. But as soon as subpoenas were issued, the criminal charges were dismissed, with prosecutors citing evidence preservation problems. Then, in August 2022, Christopher filed a civil lawsuit in California federal court, naming Erika, Secret Service agents, and American Express, and accusing Erika of corrupting agents and pushing a false prosecution. Christopher requested $18 million in damages and noted that Amex failed to investigate this properly before paying out to Erika. Christopher added that Tom had bribed rhobh to investigate him in exchange for representing him in a lawsuit, and agreed to pay rhobh $100,000 upon the start of the investigation. In response to Christopher's filing, Erika tried to dismiss this lawsuit with a slap motion. Her attorney, Evan Borges, stated, quote, "Plaintiff's claims against Erika are entirely without merit. Independent federal prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office made the decision to charge plaintiff with crimes. No one else. The notion that Erika controlled the U.S. government, or for that matter, a Fortune 100 company such as American Express, is fantasy." But on February 27, 2024, the court denied Erika's slap motion. Erika then appealed this denial, stalling the case for a number of months. However, her appeal was ultimately denied, and Christopher won his right to submit an oral argument and proceed to trial. I'll keep you updated on this trial date as more information is released. So, that's lawsuit number 2, and then there's lawsuit number 3. Marco Morante, Christopher's partner at Marco, filed his own lawsuit in Florida State Court, which is essentially a less aggressive version of Psaila's federal case, but still comes with serious consequences. In his suit, Marco accused Erika and 2 associates of torturous interference, defamation, and conspiracy to tortuously interfere, claiming Erika defamed him by accusing him of crimes and failing to tell the truth, and seeking $300,000 in damages. Marco alleged that Erika and her associates knew their claims were false. However, people went along with it because their livelihoods depended on Girardi's financial support. To defend herself in this suit, Erika hired attorney Jim Wilkes in an attempt to dismiss the case. But this just made things so much more complicated, as Wilkes went on to make a huge mistake. In March 2024, it was revealed that Wilkes didn't file his motion to dismiss correctly and failed to show up for the case management conference. This led to the court striking Erika's motion to dismiss and allowing Morante to move forward with claiming the $300,000 default. However, at the time of this error, Marco and his team didn't move to file for the default, and Erika hired a different attorney for a limited appearance. Things then went quiet for a while as Morante waited for Erika's new team to make their move. Then, on May 20th, 2025, Morante filed the motion for default against Erika and her 2 named co-defendants. In this filing, Morante claimed that since he filed his suit on August 9th, 2024, there had been no operative defensive pleading or motion filed, and he accused Erika and her defense team of delay tactics and gamemanship. Morante went on to request that, quote, "The court enter a default against the defendants with the proviso that defendants can cure the default if they file an answer to the complaint within 7 days of the default." This gave Erika and her team until May 27th to file a response or face the $300,000 payment. But after that, things went quiet publicly. Morante also attempted a separate suit against Wilkes a few months later, but that case was dismissed for lack of specificity. But the case against Jim Wilkes can't just be glossed over, as he isn't some random attorney in the Florida case. He's actually a recurring figure in Erika's post-Tom life. Wilkes first publicly appeared as part of Erika's financial rescue. In the Housewife and the Hustler documentary in 2021, it was revealed that Wilkes gave Erika $150,000 to pay for a divorce lawyer and support her after she was cut off from Tom's money. When asked how much he had spent helping Erika, Wilkes himself claimed he'd spent a couple of million and, quote, "can't conceive of what it's cost me and my practice." After this admission, even more allegations surfaced involving a Wells Fargo account, which reportedly named both Jim and Erika as account holders, with deposits totaling around $400,000. The CFO for Wilkes & Associates, Timothy Kulig, stated that the money in that account came either from Wilkes' personal funds or a distribution from the firm. Kulig also pointed out that the Wilkes firm had applied for 2 Paycheck Protection Program loans during COVID and received one loan of roughly $2.3 million and another for $2 million for 140 employees. However, Kulig claims that only 100 people were employed at the time. If true, this implies that Wilkes & Associates may have inflated employee numbers to receive a bigger payout, some of which potentially could have been funneled into Erika's account. It's important to stress that no charges, allegations, or investigations have been brought against Wilkes or his firm for these claims. But In court filings tied to the Psaila saga, Wilkes has been accused of being the, quote, mastermind of a conspiracy to protect Erika, and specifically of urging Tom and Erika to strategically divorce and devise a story that would protect her from financial ruin or even criminal prosecution if Tom couldn't escape the lawsuits. And this matters because Erika filed for divorce on November 3rd, 2020, and within weeks, the financial collapse escalated and creditors moved in, so there could be truth to this tale. And there's one more layer to add. Erika has also admitted that divorcing Tom isn't simple because of the conservatorship. In fact, on December 18th's episode of Watch What Happens Live, Erika confirmed that she has filed for legal separation from Tom, but stated, quote, it's very difficult to get someone who's incompetent to divorce. I have to ask the conservator. Let's take a look.
Why haven't you filed for divorce from Tom?
Oh, I have.
Oh, you have?
I got it so wrong. Yes, of course I have. I filed for separation. It's very difficult to get someone who's incompetent to divorce. I have to ask the conservator. It's just not that easy. You guys need to stop with all that. Yeah.
Right.
And yes, like chill on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you thought at all about seeing him?
I have.
And?
No.
Right.
I'm not, it's just too much. That's enough. It needs to, he's done. It is what it is.
Yes.
So, while Erika's fighting the battle of her life over this $25 million suit and awaiting her divorce, she's also found time for a new relationship with retired US Army Sergeant John McPhee. Erika confirmed the relationship on the Diamonds in the Rough podcast with Teddy Mellencamp in July last year, explaining that she and John McPhee had only been on 2 dates when a low-key mani-pedi outing suddenly became headline news after she was photographed by the paparazzi. Erika described John as a nice man, adding that she hadn't been publicly linked to anyone in around 5 years. So, who is John McPhee? Well, he's a retired US Army Special Operations Sergeant Major who later worked in private security, including reportedly doing security work for Heidi Montag. Erika says she recognized him from podcast appearances, then later spotted him backstage in London at the Mighty Hoopla Festival while John was there with Spencer Pratt. And in classic Erika fashion, she walked right up, introduced herself, and made the first move. So, while Erika's legal battles continue to intensify, her personal life is clearly moving forward. But where does this leave Erika? Well, Tom has been convicted and sentenced, but Erika is still fighting a bankruptcy trustee over $25 million, while also facing major claims from the Marco situation that could cost her millions more, and heading towards a 10-day trial with no settlement in sight. And with allegations now dragging in a new supporting character, Jim Wilkes, the question becomes even bigger than did Erika know what Tom was doing? It becomes who was trying to protect Erika, and what was she conspiring? Did she know these charges were coming before they hit? What do you guys think? Is Erika guilty? Should she face the same fate as Tom? Or has she been caught up in something much bigger than she knew and is stuck fighting her way out? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to hype, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more reality TV news and updates on this case as it heads to trial. Thanks for watching.